Joining us, MS Now Justice and intelligence reporter Ken Dilanian and former senior FBI official and MS Now national security and intelligence analyst Christopher O'Leary. So, Chris, we got more information here, yes. We got a timeline, yes. But there are still some significant details that are being left out. They don't have access to the camera. Can you help me understand how they would not have access to the video on if it was a Ring camera or another sort of doorbell camera? That video goes online. How would they not have access to it?
Well, I think what the FBI and the local sheriff highlighted is whoever perpetrated this act clearly had some technical expertise. And as we were discussing yesterday, in situations like this where it's a targeted kidnapping or a hostage taking, there's usually pre-attack surveillance, reconnaissance. People don't want to just walk into something blindly. So they're calculated about what they do. So it appears that whoever perpetrated this had the technical expertise to penetrate that security system. Now, was that done beforehand so they could wait at a distance and determine when Mrs. Guthrie was home, and then they disabled it to allow themselves to make entry into the house? That certainly sounds like the picture that's coming together. So I think that demonstrates a level of technical skill and sophistication that might rule some other potential subjects out. Going back to everybody's still a subject, known associates to the family should be easily ruled out as time goes on, because what you should be able to do is get their cooperation, find out if they were in their residence at 2 o'clock in the morning, corroborate that by their cell phone activity, by their vehicles, by any alibi, somebody who can ascertain that they were there, by Ring cameras in their neighborhood. So you should be able to start getting rid of potential subjects that may have been initially considered and start focusing in on an individual or groups that might have actually pulled this off. And then the other thing I'll say is, there was questions and criticisms about the FBI and the sheriff going back in there for a second round of evidence collection. It's not a great optic, but it's also not unusual. So they just went back in for a second look, or maybe the investigation to date has taken them to a point where they needed to refocus on something. But things they'll be looking for is all that forensic evidence that might be at the house. Foot traffic, was there one or multiple people in the house? Can they assess that from footprints or depressions in the carpet, whatever it may be? Are we talking about a singular person or multiple people? And then lastly, I'll highlight the video and digital evidence. They will start expanding the concentric circles on their search. So since this happened in a period of darkness, there's not a lot of vehicle or foot traffic going on, certainly in this more rural area. So they'll start looking for any car that was on the road at that time, even if it's a distance away, and trying to determine if they had an ingress or egress route during the times that this was happening, and also trying to locate that vehicle in other locations on license plate readers or anything else that they can start narrowing the scope of all of this.
There seems to be some interesting technology here, because they have on the timeline the garage door opening and the garage door closing, which does indicate that it was on some sort of sensor that alerts a system when it opens and closes. There are ADT systems, other security systems that will tell you when individual doors in your house open if you have sensors on those doors and those times. Do you find it interesting or intriguing, at least, that we didn't get any indication that there was another sensor maybe on a door for when a door opened at some point during the disappearance?
So the unfortunate thing is, any detective who's ever worked a burglary, good burglars, good criminals know how to mask these systems. Opening somebody's garage door, street gangs know how to do that. The technology is not that advanced for most of these security systems, and it's fairly easy to duplicate that technology. There's actually scanners that people drive around well-off neighborhoods trying to capture the codes. So, I mean, it's a routine thing. the ability to disable the surveillance system, the Ring doorbell, that certainly suggests a certain level of sophistication that is, different and distinct from a local criminal. But, again, the sheriff and the special agent in charge highlighted they'll be looking at everything. I will highlight again, though, that the FBI was brought in for a purpose. They have the authorities and the capabilities and the resources and the expertise to work this not only locally, but was Mrs. Guthrie taken across state lines? Was she potentially taken across the border, given the proximity to Mexico? And FBI has the liaison relationships and a presence down in Mexico to be able to work this from both sides of the border, which I am confident they are working to gather any intelligence, meet any sources that might be able to report on anything that would help with a new lead. And then lastly, I'll say the crisis negotiation unit and the behavioral analysis folks and the people who work kidnapped for ransom around the world every day in the FBI are looking at things to see if there is a group that has the same MO, has done things like this in the past, and they're asking for Bitcoin. They've used similar language or technology, or this email address that sent the ransom note is similar in methods of delivery as others. So they're certainly comparing this to other kidnappings that happen nearly every day in Mexico, Haiti, and around the world to see if this was some international organization.
Ken, on the subject of the ransom notes, the FBI agent in charge there said that there was one deadline on one of the ransom notes for today at 5 p.m. There's a second deadline next Monday. So they're waiting to see what happens at this deadline. They note that the Guthries have not been contacted further by anybody who is asking for money from them. They're not offering proof of life, as the Guthries have asked for. They did so in a really emotional plea last night. At what point does the FBI start, saying these things are just opportunists who are looking to make some easy cash?
Well, first I want to say, Katie, you asked the question of why the video might not be in the cloud. I believe authorities said that they didn't have a subscription, assuming it's a Ring camera. They had the Ring camera, but they didn't have a subscription. When you don't have a subscription, the Ring camera still works. You can see who's at the door, but it doesn't record the video to the cloud. And so it's just a local storage of the video, and it records over, and they took the Ring camera anyway, so that foreclosed that possibility. In terms of the ransom note, this was a frustrating and grim briefing by law enforcement because there were so many questions they could not answer. And that was one of them. Is this a real ransom note? They just don't know the answer to that. The FBI special agent in charge did say that there was no method of communication specified in the ransom note, which suggests to them that perhaps it's not a real ransom note. But, you heard the sheriff at the end there. He wouldn't even say definitively whether this was a kidnapping. Now, as Chris knows, oftentimes law enforcement knows more than they're willing to say in a public forum like that. They may have some theories, they may have some leads, but no suspect, no person of interest, could not say for sure that she was targeted even. So really, there's so many more questions than answers at this point in this investigation, Katie.
It was also interesting, Ken, that they refused to say, or they declined to say, which family member dropped her off last night. There was some outlier reports over the past few days that focused in, and we heard a question on Savannah Guthrie's brother-in-law, Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law. And yesterday we heard the sheriff dismiss that, saying this idea that we have a suspect or a person of interest is not true. And everybody took it to mean that the sheriff was denying that report. But today it was notable, I thought, that he declined to say which family member dropped her off.
That's right. And he declined. He basically said they haven't ruled anyone out. He was asked that question specifically, and he said, I can't rule anyone out at this point. But because, of course, they're going to thoroughly investigate anyone that had any contact with her, the last people that saw her. That doesn't mean that they're guilty of anything, but that is a logical avenue of investigation. And as Chris said, and others have said, the cell site analysis that they will do will be crucial. They'll look to see what phones were pinging the towers of that area. They're going to canvass the neighborhood to look for other Ring video because other people have doorbell videos, and that could show something. But yeah, the people who had any contact with her or were in the area would be that would be a huge avenue of investigation.
So, Chris, just one other question. I know we've been talking about this as a crime. That's how the sheriff has described it. But today he said he has no clue where this idea of forced entry came from, that he has never said that. This idea that somebody forced their way into the house. And we have a timeline, yes, and the person, the system detecting a person, there's all sorts of suspicious stuff here. But he also said that he can't rule out that this was not a kidnapping. So if you're an FBI agent looking into this, at what point do you start to pursue stuff that's a little bit, still very awful, but not quite as criminal, or something that's not criminal, that she might have, gone outside, gotten locked out of the house, tried to get back in, cut herself, walked down the street, and then got, disoriented in the middle of the night. It's dark. It's super dark there in the middle of the night. I mean, at what point do you start ruling out more mundane things like that?
Well, I think they started that early on, and that probably started immediately with the sheriff's department and search dogs in the local area. But questions to the family, is she somebody, she's of advanced years, does she have any signs of dementia or confusion or any other health-related issues that would have led you to believe that she would wander off? Were there any indications through her Ring camera or anything else that show her leaving? And it doesn't appear to be any of that. And I will say, frankly, from a criminal statistic standpoint, 84-year-old grandmothers and mothers just don't disappear out of their house at 2 o'clock in the morning. So the idea that this wasn't targeted just doesn't hold water for me. So I think looking at who might have had a grievance against either Mrs. Guthrie or Savannah or others,